Maybe it's probert, like Robert. You know, sexism is still a thing. Like, color me shocked, right? Well, hello. Welcome back to my channel. Just Shauna here to talk about some friggin' books, which I have either read or DNF'd recently. And we've got 3 DNFs. I was on a pretty good streak of not having DNFs for a second, but the streak is broken. We have a new streak going now of DNFs. First up, we have the graphic novel that I was talking about. This is volume 1 of Lightfall by Tim Probert. I would think Probert, but I have no idea. Maybe it's Probert, like Robert. At any rate, this is a middle grade graphic novel series. I did talk about this briefly in my haul because it's a library book, so I mentioned it there. But it is just so cute. I really like the art style. I don't know if you can see. Fantasy. Very much a fantastical world. It's called Urpa. The little blurb. In the land of Urpa, an ancient threat awakens, obsessed with plunging the world into eternal darkness. Luckily, chance enlists 2 unsuspecting heroes to save the day. And those heroes are our girl here, Bee, and then her helpful friend, who is a Galdurian, the girl and the Galdurian. His name is Cad. And she has this little cat, Nim, that goes with her on all of her adventures. And I just think it's so cute. Very much middle grade, but I mean, there's some stuff that happens. There's some serious things. We have representation in here also of like anxiety, panic attack, and it's kind of cool how it is portrayed visually. When she starts feeling the panic, these like dark, swirly, smoky things like start enveloping her as she's like panicking more and more. Very much a little hopeful story and, you know, being the hero, doing things for the greater good, doing the things that are hard and scary. And I just think it's really, really sweet. I gave this first installment, book 1, 4.25 stars. If I was a wee child that was in the age range, maybe it would be higher, but you know. Then I picked up The Emperor and the Endless Palace by Justinian Huang. This I had on my 2024 anticipated releases list, and it wasn't one that I fully lost interest in and no longer wanted to read. It was just one that kind of fell by the wayside. And then I saw YouTube channel Luxurious Blue. I will have him linked down below. Been following him, subscribed to him for many moons now, and he talked about it and was just raving about it being like a book that felt like written for him, right? And I was like, oh, that's awesome. That's the dream. You know, that's what we're all searching for, is books that speak to our soul in some way, that feel like this was written just for me. And it just reignited my interest in the book. So I got it from the library, an ebook. However, I did end up DNFing this one at 21%. The premise is really cool. And I think too, though, that it's listed as romance. And from everything I saw after I DNF'd it, I looked at like reviews talking about it more. And I don't know if it really can be. I don't think, it sounded like several people said that there isn't actually a happily ever after or a happily for now, and that it's showing a relationship, but it's not necessarily a healthy relationship, I guess. So like there is a romance in it, but there were a lot of people saying, I don't know that I would call it a romance. So definitely go into it with that kind of mindset, I think, is probably the best way to go into it. It's definitely queer. And the premise, let me see if there's like a quick blurb. Yeah, I mean, this quote in and of itself, like, I was like, oh, fuck yeah. What if I told you that the feeling we call love is actually the feeling of metaphysical recognition when your soul remembers someone from a previous life? And then we jump into 3 different time periods. We have the year 4 BCE, and we have a courtier who's called upon to seduce the young emperor, but quickly discovers they're both ruled by blood, sex, and intrigue. And then we have 1740, a lonely innkeeper agrees to help a mysterious visitor procure a rare medicine, only to unleash an otherworldly terror instead. And then in present day Los Angeles, a college student meets a beautiful stranger and cannot shake the feeling that they've met before. It says it's a genre-bending romantasy. Again, I didn't read it fully, so I don't know if you have read it. Let me know your thoughts on if you would call it a romance or not. Like I said, there were several people I saw being like, whether they liked it or not, being like, I don't think I would call this romance because it's not like a good relationship, I guess, or it's like really toxic. I don't know if there was like actual abuse or not, but at any rate, the premise of this like metaphysical recognition over time of someone from a previous life, I love that so much. And so that's what really struck my fancy the first time I heard about this book. But ultimately, it was simply for me, just the way the story was laid out just wasn't working for me. I wasn't able to get connected to it because we jump around to these different timelines a fair amount. And I think I just needed a little bit more time in like my introduction to each timeline before jumping to another one for me to like really get invested. We just kind of kept hopping and skipping around, and I wasn't able to really get my footing with any of these characters. I will say also, be forewarned, if you are someone who doesn't like too much smut, there's smut right off the bat, right off the get-go. There's like, oh dang, okay. We have someone who's like going around seducing people to get information and just banging it out. So if you like that, that's great, but just a heads up in case you don't like that, or again, just expectations. Go into it with the expectation. And it, again, from reviews, it sounds like things get quite hanky with the sex and the smut. And also, I did read in reviews that there is sexual assault on page, and I think multiple times, and I believe to the same character, it sounded like. And yeah, anyways, all that was not a thing for me because I didn't even get to that point. I just felt detached from the story. I just wasn't getting into it, wasn't vibing with me. Just wasn't the book for me, ultimately. Very cool concept though, and there's lots of really good reviews for it. Then I picked up a book from my owned TBR, The Wicked City by Beatriz Williams. I did a try chapter like a couple years ago, and this one was included, and I was like, oh yeah, okay, I'll check it out. And this is it's a historical fiction, and this is one with dual timelines. So we have like a woman who, in the modern time, which is like in the 90s, I think. Yeah. She's getting divorced, and she moves into this little kind of, not crappy apartment, but like a teeny apartment, and kind of weird goings on with the residents. And they say that there's like, you can hear music late at night from the other side of the wall in the basement where the laundry is. And they're like, oh, it's like some secret speakeasy, I guess. But you can hear like screams and gunshots and stuff. And so she's getting alarmed, like, what is happening? But she can't find it. And then we jump back to the 1920s where this speakeasy is actually happening. In the present day, I don't believe there's actually anything there. They're just hearing the echoes of history or something. But yeah, we have a main character in the past called, what was her actual name? Geneva. But she goes by Jin Kelly. And she is like a flapper and just living her best life in New York, ran away from home, a very bad home life, with a very bad stepfather, once again. Heads up for sexual assault. In this case, the actual assault is not, at least up to the point I got, because once again, I DNF'd, but up to the point I got in the story, it wasn't on page. Like, we didn't see the thing happening to her, but we saw leading up to the thing happening. We saw the intimidation and the words that were being said and very disgusting behavior from her stepfather. But yeah, I stopped at 23% because the POV from the past, Jin, was like full of spunk. She was so feisty. She was very like quick-witted. And I really liked her as a character. However, I wasn't really getting connected with her story. And honestly, I think maybe I just wasn't in the headspace where I wanted to read about her experience. She was going back to her hometown because her mother was sick and dying, and her brother messaged her, like sent her a telegram being like, mom's dying, you gotta come. She has all these younger siblings, but her stepfather is still in the picture. And so I just was like, I just know she's gonna have like confrontation with him, and all this stuff. And even though I'm sure it was going to be like standing up to him and whatever, I just was like, I don't want to, I'm not in the headspace to continue seeing her like grappling with this terrible, terrible thing that happened to her by her stepfather. But then the POV, the modern POV, I was not getting connected with her character at all. She just, I don't know. I get it. Like, insecurities exist, and your self-esteem, I know from experience, can take a blow after being cheated on, after getting divorced due to affair situations. Like, yeah, there's an element of that at the very least, even for the most confident person. I'm a pretty damn confident person, but like, could that shake your confidence and shake your self-esteem to some degree for most people? Yes. But like, I don't know, I just cannot relate at all. And not that I have to relate to characters, but it just like frustrates me seeing this woman being like, I'm useless and worthless and no one will ever love me again because my husband is a piece of shit that cheated on me. And like a grown woman too, not like, I understand it more when it's like teenagers or like young adults who haven't had as much experience and definitely still have a lot of that ingrained just naturally. Most people do have more insecurities when you're younger. And like not learning the lesson yet of like someone cheating on you has really nothing to do with you and everything to do with them. But like when it's a grown adult that like, again, everyone is different, I know, but I just wasn't vibing with her. And I was just like, again, not in the headspace where I want to read from one POV of a character I like, but is going through something that I'm like, oh God, I don't, And then one POV that I'm like, I don't, like, you're fine, like, you seem nice and everything, but like, I don't want to sit here as you just like shit on yourself over and over again to eventually gain your confidence back and whatever. It's a lovely story. It's a tale as old as time. I just was not in the mood for it. So that was that. And also the writing, like, it was perfectly fine. There was nothing bothering me about the writing, but it also wasn't standing out very much. The story being told, the characters, just all of it was kind of like, okay. So yeah. I don't know, I'm DNFing and I will probably unhaul. Next, I read Lightfall Book 2, Shadow of the Bird. And once again, super cute. I just love the art. I just think it's so adorable and well done. Again, and in this one, things are ramping up for sure. There was a little element that, again, it's middle grade, so I don't know, but something where I almost kind of felt like not giving middle grade kids enough credit to like pick up on something. It wasn't really a plot hole. It was just foreshadowing that was in your face, I guess. And then being like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I didn't see that before. But it was like literally, like there was a quote from a character saying something that then a few, like, you know, in the next couple of pages, our main character was like, oh my gosh, I didn't think of that. And I was like, that's literally what they said. And just like a little weird thing there where, again, I don't know, maybe middle grade kids genuinely wouldn't see it like for what it was, but I almost kind of feel like it's not giving them enough credit. So this one was slightly less enjoyable. And also there's just like all this bad shit happening. And I also felt like there's something going on with Cad that almost isn't delved into quite enough. That I felt, I guess, or talked about enough. Like there's a conversation to be had that we don't really have. So this one I ended up giving 3.5 stars. Still enjoyable, still quite liked it. Definitely didn't want to stop or anything. And then I got to book 3, The Dark Times. And this is not over. There's going to be more. Also, I just saw this tab. This fucking series to me is so funny sometimes. This little guy right here, I can't remember his name. He's like this little dude. He shows up and he's just like this little wandering, almost wizard type thing that is always just like, I'm here. And he can like, he has magic and he can speak to the earth basically and like speak to the rocks and stuff. And he's just so like point blank, matter of fact, dry. And just like, well, what? I just talked to the rocks. I asked them to help, and so they helped. I don't know what to tell you. When everyone's like, how did you just do that? Oh my God. And he's like, I just asked the rocks, whatever. Like that's his kind of demeanor. And he's just adorable. I love him so much. And yeah, I will continue. I don't think this is one that I'll like buy copies of to ever reread, but it's really cute. It's just nice little adorable middle grade fantasy time, graphic novel form with artwork that I really like. This one I gave 4 stars. Next, I picked up a nonfiction that I had on my shelves, Hip Hop is History by Questlove, as well as this other guy who co-wrote it with him. What's his name? Ben Greenman. Give him credit too. We can see I tabbed the hell out of this with sections of mentions of songs. Read the little synopsis on the back. When hip-hop first emerged in the 1970s, it wasn't expected to become the cultural force it is today. But for a young black kid growing up in a musical family in Philadelphia, it was everything. He stayed up late to hear the newest songs on the radio. He saved his money to buy vinyl as soon as it landed. He even started to make his own songs. That kid was Questlove. Now in this landmark book, Questlove traces the creative and cultural forces that made and shaped hip-hop, highlighting both the forgotten but influential gems and the undeniable chart-topping hits, and weaves it all together with the stories no one else knows. It is at once an intimate, sharply observed story and a sweeping theory of the evolution of the great artistic movement of our time. Questlove approaches it with both the encyclopedic fluency of an obsessive fan and the unique expertise of an innovative participant. Hip-hop is history and also his history. This is definitely more memoir than like objective history and like academic, introspection on the genre. So go into, if you're someone who's into hip hop at all and thinking of reading this, you're the only type of people I would recommend this to for sure. But yeah, if you are thinking about reading this at any point, go into it with that mindset for sure. You definitely can see some of his own just personal bias. It's his opinion on all these things, whether it's acknowledged on the page or not. And it often is. He often will say his own like biases he either has still or had in the past. He also acknowledges a lot of his like pretension that he has had with various artists, first up and coming, where he kind of would scoff at them, and then other people being like, no man, they're great, you gotta listen to it. And giving them another chance and like getting it. It's a lot of like him either getting this evolution with a new artist or new sound, or like not getting it, or just struggling to get it, taking some more time. This is definitely a book showcasing the evolution of the genre, and specifically the music behind the genre and the evolution of the music and the sound. And from someone who is deeply educated about music in general, he wrote another book, I think just called Music is History, where he's just talking about the evolution of just different genres, I think. I'm not sure. But his parents were musicians, so he definitely has an encyclopedic knowledge of music itself, jazz, funk, like stuff from the past and how it evolved into hip-hop and other things too. And he was also a live witness, as he's about the same age as the genre of hip-hop. It started coming out when he was a kid, so he got to witness the evolution and also was an active participant in it by being a member of The Roots, of course. And so he was there not only seeing it as a music lover, but as a participant of this whole evolution. Do I always agree on his personal opinions of certain artists? No, definitely not, but I wouldn't expect to. Like, if you're going into it thinking that and you're only gonna like it if you agree with everything he says, then, I don't know, don't read it, I guess. Why would you? And I've seen criticism, and I agree that there's definitely some key players left out of the conversation, and definitely less mention of women, female artists. However, like The Roots would work with female artists a lot, trying to like uplift them and put them more in the forefront and get them more attention. That was like a thing that they cared about. And he does mention female artists, and with positive accolades for them, but they are definitely more briefly mentioned. And to be fair, from my opinion, sort of, the industry at large often ignores, leaves out, or downplays the contributions of women in the industry. They aren't given as much attention, press, marketing, certainly back in the 80s and even into the 90s. Still today also, you know, sexism is still a thing. Like, color me shocked, right? So it's kind of almost like there were women for sure, but like he's talking a lot about the people at the forefront. And yeah, unfortunately, the nature of our society and certainly the nature of the hip hop genre, the industry, women weren't often put right at the forefront. So, you know, there's less mention of them, certainly. I did notate in my review on Storygraph that it's too bad Alligator Bites Never Heal by Doechii was not out by the time this went to publication. He mentioned Andre 3000's New Black Sun in the like epilogue or whatever. And I have to believe that Doechii would have been mentioned as well if that album had, or the mixtape, but if that had been out at the time. But maybe that's my own bias too, because I love Doechii. From a writing standpoint, this can definitely be like a little too stream of consciousness. And I immersion read this along with the audio. He narrates the audiobook, and I think that's a really good way to do it. He's a good narrator, I felt. But there's definitely pages that feel very meandering. And like, you know, when you either have in your own head your own internal thoughts, or like a conversation with a friend and you're just talking, or you're thinking, and then you get to a point where you're like, how do we get here? Let's backtrack. My best friend and I used to do this all the time when we were growing up, because that would constantly happen to us. We just bebop around in a conversation, bouncing. And oh my God, yeah, that one time and that. And then, well, that reminds me of this other thing and blah, 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 blah. And like, well, did you see that the other day, so-and-so, blah, blah, blah. And then like, we'd be like, how the hell what were we talking about? And we would backtrack the conversation to get back to like, oh yeah, that spurred that. And then that spurred that. This felt like that several times, where he would almost like interrupt his thought to be like, oh, that makes me think of this other thing. And then now back to this, where I would have to like go back to the page before, like, wait, what the hell was he talking about? Oh, yeah, okay. And that, you know, is a little bit of a detriment for sure, but I mostly just kind of went along with it. Just seeing the book as his own personal stream of consciousness with some editing and some organization added to it for sure, just of his experience with hip hop in general throughout his life. Overall though, I had a great time with this book, like a great time. I today love hip hop, but as you might imagine, if you've been here before, you know I'm from rural Podunk, Michigan, and I grew up in the 90s pretty much only listening to country music. 90s country music that my mom would have on the radio. And I didn't really get like choose the radio station privileges or even care until probably about middle school age, when I started like, you know, caring more about and like having my besties, my best friends, and like they're listening to this music, and so I want to listen to that music too. And so like I want to listen to the top 40. And Mom, can we listen to this instead? And like Britney Spears and the Backstreet Boys and this and that. And it was like right in the late 90s, and then 2000 is when I went to high school. And that's around when I would say that more rap that was like mainstream started being on the radio on like top 40 stations. You know, your Ja Rule, your Nelly, your Jay-Z at the time too. And I feel like a lot more of it was starting to play on those types of stations that had previously pretty much been pop or rock. And that is when I realized that I quite enjoyed rap, hip hop. And for me, it's not necessarily, I mean, it is the music to a point. Like, I love a good beat. And there's some hip hop that just, the sound of it just isn't my vibe. And I'm not musically educated, so I can't quite put my finger on it always. Whereas Questlove is very educated, so he can like put his finger. And he did say too that he's more into like the musicality of it, the instruments or the samples that are being used, and the break beats and how they're doing all of this, and the snare drum sound, like the sound of it. Whereas he mentions Black Thought, one of his co-members of the Roots, who was more into the lyricism and the flow. And I think I definitely tend to be more interested in that, in the lyricism and the flow. I've always been a writer. And I think that's what like really, because what other connection do I fucking have to like hip hop? None. Culturally, it's not like I grew up in a city surrounded by diverse people who listened to it, or like I saw the cultural importance of it or anything. I'm in this fucking little podunk country town with literally only white people. And I just started hearing it and it just resonated. And I think it was just the lyricism of it mostly. Like I said, I've always been a writer. I've always wanted to be a writer. And when I was younger, I was much more into poetry. And there are so many parallels to hip hop and poetry and the lyricism of it and just clever wordplay. And sometimes when it's like dumb, but it's still like, it's funny. And he talks about that too, like certain artists that some of their lines that people say are like, you know, lame or whack or whatever, but like they're funny. And artists who kind of like lean into that, into being comical and funny and just like, yeah, fuck it. This is kind of a dumb line, but it's silly and it's fun. And I can very much enjoy that as well. But yeah, I just really started listening to it, resonating with it, and it's still my favorite genre of music. But yeah, I missed out on all of the early stuff. I didn't listen to it at the time. And of course, once I started getting into hip hop, I went back and listened to like the big ones a little bit, but I wasn't like listening to it as it was coming out. And also because I started getting into the music in like the early aughts, a lot of the older stuff, like the sound of it sounds so old to me. So I was never really able to find very much of it that I really, really liked. But from this, I did have a playlist. He has a playlist on Spotify that like is artists he mentioned throughout the book. I made my own before I knew that, where I just, everything he said, I'm like adding it to the playlist to go back and listen to. And I have already found some that are like new favorite songs. The Far Side, I had heard of the Far Side for sure. And I know I had heard some Far Side songs without knowing that they were the Far Side. But like, I fucking love the Far Side. The sound is just, I really, really dig it. So yeah, I had a great time with this. All that to say. Jesus. I ended up giving it though, I did rate it. I gave it 4.5 stars. I think had the writing been maybe a little less stream of consciousness and a little tighter, I would have probably enjoyed it even more. But as it stands, 4.5, something I really, really enjoyed. Again, would not recommend if you are not into hip hop at all or music really at all either, for sure. But if you never really listen to hip hop, it's gonna just feel like a bunch of names being thrown at you and like stuff he's talking about. It's just gonna feel like someone being like blah, 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 lecturing you on something that you don't care about. So would recommend if you are at all into hip hop. Lastly, the last one I will talk about right now, another DNF. Ending on a low note. Long Live Evil by Sarah Reese Brennan. This one, I also stopped right around the 20% mark. I stopped at 19%. That seems to be my thing lately. I keep DNFing right around 20%. And a lot of these that I DNF, I feel like DNFing them sooner, but I'm like, let me give it at least to this point, if not further. But yeah, I wasn't finding myself all that entertained with this one. Initially, I was kind of like, okay, we're off to an all right start when we were in the present time, because this one is fantasy, but the setup is this girl who has cancer and she is essentially knows that she's dying and is not going to beat the cancer. And she's like laid up in a hospital bed. Her and her younger sister have bonded over their shared love of this particular made up fantasy book series. And then she finds herself basically walking into a portal and ending up in this fantasy series world. And she just goes with it and is like, let me become the evil queen. Let's do that. And yeah, initially when we were in the modern time, I was quite enjoying it. And then even right when we first got to the fantasy world, I was like, okay, all right. But pretty quickly, I lost steam with it. The dialogue is super corny, like very, very, very cornball. And it just wasn't feeling like camp and entertaining. It was feeling corny for me. So I just was not entertained enough to want to continue. I just was like, whatever. I'm not having that much fun. I wasn't super, super like, ugh, this sucks. it just was like, it's a little corny and I'm not that entertained, so like I'm out. I don't care. That kind of a DNF, which is honestly most of my DNFs lately. That is all for today. If you have read any of these, let me know what your thoughts were or are. Or if you are intrigued by any of these, let me know which ones. Or of course, if you would like to say hello, you can just leave an emoji to let me know you're watching. As always, thank you so much for your time. Hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.